Great to be with you, Dr. Paul.
Well, very good. We have a problem to solve. There are problems out there. Political problems seem to be a mess. Social problems seem to be a mess. Politics and economically, there's a mess. Even though they're printing a lot of money, it just doesn't seem to satisfy everybody. We want to talk about the insanity of solving the problem of the diminishing value of the dollar by printing a lot more of them, and then deciding all we need is regulation of prices. And at this particular juncture, they want to regulate the wages and prices, especially the wages, and that is regulate them upward. People are short of cash. The cost of living is going up, so we need to raise the minimal wage, and that will solve the problem. The one characteristic of all these crises that I've sort of watched for many decades now is no matter what's going on, whether what kind of a crisis we have in the monetary system and prices, and whether the economy is weak or too strong, the prices are going up, there's always one thing that they say: we don't have enough money. And when you think about it, why don't they have enough money? Especially under today's conditions, we've never in the history of the world have seen a country print money and create money like we have been doing. And yet, what is the shout? We need more money. And therefore, what we have to do is we have to get Congress to do their part. They should appropriate money and pass it out to everybody. And even if it's in the trillions of dollars, but then they say, well, we might miss somebody. So if somebody's working for $12 an hour and producing for about $10 an hour's worth of work, you have to solve that problem. Solving the problem is equality. So everybody should make $15 an hour, and that will make up for the deficit and the cost of living. That's generally the sign that there's something wrong with the monetary system and the economic system, is when the people suffer and the costs are too high, that the spending and the inflation of the monetary system, the printing of money, is the problem. And the odds of you solving that problem are slim to none. And I think they're getting desperate. We have a desperate situation in the political system, in the economic system, in the social system, and quite frankly, I think the foreign policy problems are going to grow exponentially with the new president, because in spite of the old-fashioned idea that Democrats were better for peace than Republicans, it looks like they're going to have some competition with Trump, because Trump managed 4 years imperfecly, but like he said, he wanted to wind down some wars, and he also didn't want to start a new war, and there's relative success there. But so we have all these problems. So Chris, the solution is to this is to raise the minimum wage, which will be a cost. And I'm sure you must have some shortcoming thinking on this, that it might not just be what the liberals think it will be, that if this is going to help us, quite possibly it might make things worse. Chris?
That's right, Dr. Paul. The minimum wage is one of those feel-good laws where superficially it seems like a good idea. I mean, like the stimulus checks. Government has no money, yet they're all sending checks out to everyone. It's a feel-good thing. But it feels good at the moment, but it produces very bad results. Let's say you have a worker who's earning $9 an hour sweeping floors. That's what he agreed to. That's what the employer agreed to. But then the politician comes in and says, no, you must pay him $15 an hour. Well, the business owner is going to say, no, I'll sweep it myself. I'll give it to another person and give them a few bucks more per hour. Or I'll get a Roomba. I'll automate and have the floor swept that way. So a government dictate cannot make this person, who now is really earning the minimum wage of zero because he now doesn't have a job, a government dictate cannot give you value, cannot make you more valuable. And not valuable as a person, because people say, oh, what do you mean value? How can he stop? Not as a person, not as a husband or a wife, as an employee with skills. That's what you're paid for when you get a job. So the government sticks its nose in to a voluntary contract and completely destroys it. But it feels good at the moment, but produces very little.
Yes, and there are a lot of other tricks they play. This is just one of them. You know, in World War II and also in the Korean War, they had wage and price control. So prices have to be controlled too. And it's always serious business. You know, if you break the law, you can be in big trouble. And where you have the most control of prices it's in the country that do the most interference in the economic system. That's socialism and communism, because they control the means of production. So therefore, to have it operate smoothly, they have to decide what the prices are. And they can't decide it. They just chuck the whole idea of supply and demand in a marketplace, determining and giving the information necessary to find out what people should be producing and what not to produce. But this is, we're talking about just the wages. But you can be assured that there's a lot of other things already in place that are regulating the system, trying to make sure that everybody's treated fairly and that the prices are fair and equal. And they do this with the intent that everybody will have an equal amount of money and purchasing power, and it doesn't work. So, but I do think it'll get much worse. But this isn't new. This isn't something that I just happen to remember, you know, from World War II on. It's been around for hundreds of years, because as long as you can find in history where they debauched the currency, inflated the currency, destroyed the value of currency, which pushes the prices up, has been used, the wage and price control of the results has been the method of taking care of this, because they cannot afford to let the cat out of the bag and let the people know why there's a shortage of money when they're printing day and night the money. And of course, it's because they're devaluing the currency, and the currency has no restraint to it. And we're living in an age, a historic age, where literally trillions of dollars are being produced. Last year it was over $6 trillion, and they're at it again. There was a big argument, big debate going on in Washington right now. Should we pump out another $1.9 trillion or $2.9 trillion? You know, but nobody says quit before it's too late. So it is not a solution. It's just a diversion, you know, from the real problem, which is a monetary and a spending problem. But the one price that they get involved in when we have conditions like this, that they have to regulate, because if the market was allowed to regulate the interest rates, very quickly this thing would be closed down, because nobody could afford the interest rates. And so they have to make sure that most of the people, especially the wealthy people and investors, have very, very low interest rates. But if you had a market, you know, the interest rates probably would be much, much lower. Could be, you know, the average interest rate could be 5, 6, 8%. But there's only one place you can get a hint of what the interest rates might be, and that is credit card interest rates payment. I was astounded when I found out. Somebody said, well, they had heard of a credit card company that's now up to 39% interest payments if you know, borrow money from the credit card company. Well, that's not for most of the people in the country, but interest rates are up. The market says it'd be much higher because the devaluation of the currency continued, and they're using that to solve the problem, and they're only making it worse. But not only do they manipulate the value of the interest rates, the price of the interest rate, as a solution, they do other things too to try to hide what's doing. And internationally, the fixing of currencies, the currency markets. There's the markets that would, you know, be free markets in determining the value of currencies. Of course, in the old days, which was in my lifetime, is that the dollar was defined in terms of gold up until 1971. So things were chaotic because it wasn't a truly gold standard. Americans still were allowed to own gold, but you know, there was a little bit of operation with the economy, but now that's not the case. So there's a lot of currency wars going on, and that's going to continue to increase. But that's price fixing. So whether it's price fixing of wages, price fixing of goods and services, or price fixing of currencies, and all these things result in making the economy worse. But the people aren't told exactly what the problem is because it's politically unacceptable. You'd be accused of lying. And now if you tell a bold lie like inflation comes from too many dollars, how could we have too many dollars? No, you can't say that. I mean, the truth really hurts people who are manipulating the economy, and that is what's happening. But the one thing, Chris, that we've been warning about, and you have spoken about, and that is this cannot last forever, and it just keeps boiling and boiling over, and they rescue the economy for a little while, just like this past year. There's a tremendous rescue of the economy, even in spite of the tremendous damage placed on the correction already in place with the illogical lockdown of the whole economy, which decreased production, which affected all kinds of prices. So the interference by government with prices of wages, currencies, interest rates, it's all opposite of what free markets are like, and they want to avoid it, and they will not admit. The closer you get to a socialist communist philosophy, and unfortunately we're moving in that direction, not toward a free market, the worse this gets, because some bureaucrats make the decision, and that is what happened. Can you imagine people at one time saying, well, we have this pipeline going from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico, and I don't like it. I'm going to sign this little piece of paper. It's canceled. There was an argument, a good argument about what it was going to do to jobs and why it wasn't a good idea and why the oil prices were going to go up. But not a whole lot about why in the world have we given that much authority to one person, the President of the United States, who said, I'm going to do it. I'm getting rid of that pipeline. We don't want cheap energy, and we're going to stop it. So they come in because they want to appease a small segment of people who don't think we should have that pipeline. But the bigger issue is why did we turn those decisions over to some bureaucrats or one individual? That to me is astounding, because once again it is interfering in the prices. Guess what's happening right now? You know, oil not too long ago was under $50 a barrel. Now it's closer to $60 a barrel. And it's going to go a lot higher because the new administration doesn't even pretend to want to help the market, keep energy supplies, available to the people. So it's this whole notion that the bureaucrats are so smart that they know how to take care of everybody's needs and demands. At the same time, all the ill effects can be canceled out by more of the same policy. Have more debt, print more money, and we'll work our way out of it.
Right, Dr. Paul, it's political intervention is really a fight against reality and the truth. And in the end, the truth always wins, reality always wins. It's just painful when the battle is going on because it hurts everyone when they do it. And earlier I mentioned how the minimum wage hurts workers. It also hurts small businesses. And we just have to look at this last year at what happened with small businesses and how big businesses capitalized. Was it because all these tens of thousands of businesses go out of business because their customers didn't want their products anymore, nobody liked them? It wasn't that at all. They're going out of business because of government dictates. And it's amazing because the left pushes all this stuff. They hurt the workers who they're trying to help, and they say that they're against big corporations, yet they're the best friends of big corporations. Their policies, a big corporation loves it, and that includes the minimum wage. What if you're a small business and you can't pay $15 an hour? You can't cut costs, you can't automate, you're trapped. What do? You go under. You go under because your customers don't like you anymore? No, you go under because a politician says this is what you have to pay people. So again, This is intervention. It's a fight against reality, and it just hurts everybody except the small elites and the politicians and the big businesses.
Oh, you're right about that. You know, when a country gets into a situation like we have now, and actually the whole world, where they live beyond their means, individuals, corporations, and governments, when they live beyond their means, they have to live beneath their means to get things straightened out. And so they have to eventually eliminate the malinvestment, investing in the wrong things, and they have to eliminate the debt. So take, for instance, the well-intention, I'm sure, of helping people go through college and set up a student loan policy. Before you knew it, got very popular and got more careless. And the ex-students now, they're out struggling and they can't pay it. That debt is up to $1.6 trillion. And so it's that kind of thing that they can't handle. So that'll be liquidated, and it just means that it will be a debt to the government. Most of it is owned by the government, so it'll just be more debt to the government, and that money will all become like pretty press money, and they'll never do that equitably. How are they going to make sure that everybody that received the loan is equal to the other person? So they'll probably exempt everybody, or it'll be contagious and people will just quit paying. So the debt will disappear. That's the way most of the debt is going to disappear, through liquidation, through inflation, and botching the currency, where the currency doesn't buy anything and it doesn't buy the debt. You know, we talk about the wages and emphasizing wages because people don't have enough money and the prices are going up. The other thing that that goes wrong, where the people complain, especially the working class and the middle class, they say, my standard of living is going down. And there's a lot of confusion out there right now because things have been tided over, you know, and made worse, of course, with the lockdown. So temporarily, they've gotten a little boost. Some people feel better, but even that was not equitable. A lot of people got it that shouldn't have got it. People make $150,000 are getting these checks. Dead people are getting these checks. It just goes on and on. It's when the details of this is written, if it ever is, people say, what were they thinking? How did they think this was going to help the standard of living? That's really what counts. Is you know, the getting rid of the notion that we have a shortage of money. Federal Reserve notes. That'll solve the problem. No, we have a shortage of identifying the marketplace and letting the market dictate value and prices, and let people produce and take advantage of the signals they get. You know, right now they more or less have canceled out this whole notion of supply and demand. And that's what socialism does. So although we're not a socialist nation, we have extreme interventionism with a lot of socialist leanings. Because socialism usually means the government owns everything. Well, what's the big difference between the government owning it, like they do in a Soviet or a fascist system? It's still bad when the bureaucrats control it. Just take a look at the nonsense going on about, you know, the dictatorial rights of the bureaucrats and the local government officials who just love all this power given to them under the guise of taking care of the coronavirus crisis. So they have all this power, but fortunately, Chris, for us, I think there's some people out there nibbling away at it. We read good stories about what's happening in Florida and other states in South Dakota, and we're really reading the bad stories with the states that kept the regulations on, you know, the longest or the worst. But once again, I complain about one person deciding about the pipeline. Well, what about all these regulations? And most of us even admit, if you pin them down, they never passed the law. Most of these regulations just came out of the sky, and people get intimidated, and there's social pressures put on. You might be banished from the economy, and you will suffer all kinds of social consequences if you don't obey. And yet sometimes there's not even a law that says that, okay, you can't go into a restaurant, these sort of things. So right now we're in flux, and believe me, the problems out there won't be solved with tinkering with the wage, the minimum wage. The one negative, of course, it doesn't work and it costs a lot of money. The other negative is it might help for a little while, and bailouts of the past year helped for a little while. People say, see, it helped, we have to keep doing it more and more and more. Well, that's damaging, because people get misled, thinking, well, these radicals that want sound money, and they don't want the government just to print money when they run up debt, and let the politicians buy their constituents whatever they need, we'll get it for them. Oh, the students need loans, we'll give them to them. Anybody who needs something, we'll give them to them, because deficits don't matter, which is what's been preached in our universities for dozens of years, decades now. That is what they've been taught, especially since the Depression, that deficits don't matter. Everybody pretends they do, but they really don't. If they were worried about it, they wouldn't be doing it. The politicians wouldn't be doing it. The Federal Reserve wouldn't exist. You know, we deal with these problems, but we're not there. So that's why I think that things are going to get a lot worse, and we have a race with what's happening versus us getting information out to get people to understand why they will be better off. It's in their best interest to go along with the belief in liberty.
Right, Dr. Paul. I'll finish up agreeing, of course, it will be getting much worse, because it has to, because we want it to. Actually, we want the bottom to be put in someday, and that for people to embrace new ideas. But first, you have to identify the problem, and you nailed it, Dr. Paul. We have an hyper-interventionist government. And at the top sits the Federal Reserve. By printing money, manipulating interest rates, they make everything else possible, which is, and I listed some stuff, you know, all the subsidies and bailouts for big businesses, the licenses, the fees on top of fees. You have the alphabet soup agencies, the so-called regulators, that, you know, it's a revolving door between the big business and a regulator. They go back and forth. And who do you think they're looking out for? The regular American? No, they're just sort of feathering their own nests. Government has tangled itself into healthcare and totally destroyed that industry. Like you mentioned, they destroyed education. You have student loans and student loan forgiveness. You have that mess. You have stimulus checks, foreign aid, the empire, COVID. We could, I swear, sit here for a half an hour and take the entire show and list every single way that government interferes. We probably would run out of time. So anybody that looks at this and says, well, you know, we need government to do this. The problem is capitalism, free markets. I mean, come on already. We have the biggest government to ever exist. It's time for free markets and some capitalism to dig us out of this gigantic mess.
Very good. You know, in '87, you know, there was a crash, and it was significant. I think it already went down 20% one day. It was big news. Ronald Reagan was president, and the markets were really in turmoil. And Reagan wrote an executive order to set up this thing called a Presidential Working Group on Financial Markets to settle things down when they get out of whack. But the question is who put them out of whack? Of course, it was the Federal Reserve. But anyway, that was established, and people referred to it as the plunge protection team. Now, what do they do to protect the markets? The market is Wall Street. It has to do with the bond market. It has to do with the stock markets, the commodity markets, all this, because it's financial control. And they are very much involved. And really, their biggest goal is to maintain, you know, a functional stock market and bond market. And if you look at it in a narrow sense, if you look at it, you know, where it might go, it's still relatively calm, but it's also a bubble that's ready to burst and be uncontrollable. But everything that is done through the plunge protection team and all the agencies of government is designed to prop up, you know, the prop up the stock market and the prices of the stocks and the bonds. The marketplace is very, very powerful and usually overwhelms. They fix the price of gold at $35 an ounce for 40-some years, and finally the market says, well, you've fooled us enough for a long time. No, gold has to be higher. So the markets usually, you know, works on the long run. But with some of this money that was just sent out this past year, this trillions of dollars, believe it or not, some of it ended up in the hands of individuals that sort of like this idea of dealing with the market. And some have reported, I didn't do the measurement, but some have reported that a lot of that cash went into the smaller investor that started, you know, buying these naked puts, betting on the market will go down and manipulating the market, which goes on all the time because I think the big guys manipulate those markets, and I always have to depend on, not that they're going to quit, as much as the market will finally teach everybody a lesson, and that's why I think people should realize that. But there are these statistics. Just recently, we had the sort of a crisis between those who sold all those shorts, and they were naked shorts, and then all of a sudden there was a crisis building, and that's going to go on. That's going to go on as long as the credit is available. And the credit is always going to be available until it quits, and that's why, although the market's trying to say that interest rates could be 20, 30, or 40% when you look at credit cards or whatever. But if a big corporation or bank needs to borrow money, it's going to be very, very low, 1% or 2%. If you want to go to the bank and be frugal and act like you have some common sense and say, you know, I need to put some money away for my kids. They're going to be needing some money to go to college, and I don't want to speculate in the stock market, so I'm going to put it in a savings account and earn some interest. It's right now, people say that's the craziest thing in the world to do. A lot of people still do it. I still think ready cash has to be somewhere, but it doesn't make any sense. This whole thing punishes people who want to do the right thing, and it rewards the people who are on the inside track of the money managers and the bailout process. And guess what? With all this money, and Chris mentioned it earlier, all the bailout money, you know, bailed out big corporations and big companies, but it didn't bail out the little guy, and that's why they say the little guy has to get some help now. Make sure the checks go to the little guy, and in the meantime, let's make sure sure if he does have a job, he gets $15 an hour, even though he's only producing $10 an hour. So it's a mess because people, basically the majority, and especially those who are in influencing government, and it's in their interest to do it, is that they can be benefited by doing this, and they get the bailout. They don't have confidence in the marketplace. They don't have confidence in the principles of liberty. We have lost our way when it comes to that. and we desperately need it because it's not complex. It's simple. And if anybody wants a little guide to use the Constitution on what the government has been explicitly given authority to do, at the federal level. I mean, we wouldn't have a Federal Reserve, we wouldn't have the welfare warfare state, we'd have our troops at home, we'd have a sensible government, and believe me, we would find out where the deep state really is. But people have to have confidence that liberty is better than authoritarianism. Voluntarism is much better than allowing the bureaucrats to tell us what to do, what restaurant we can go to, whether or not we can go to church, and all these things. I'm not shocked and totally surprised at all that nonsense, but I'm very disappointed that the people don't say enough is enough. We know what the answer is, and the answer comes in the quality and the determination to promote a free society. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.